Hello and welcome to another late night talk. My name is Stephen Aryan. My guest this evening, this morning, whatever time it is, wherever you are, is Shauna Lawless. Welcome, Shauna. Hi.
Hello.
Nice to see you again, kind of. I've seen you on panels and we talk all the time on Headspace, but it's nice to have you here in an official capacity to talk about your journey to becoming a traditionally published author.
Thank you for having me.
Well, you're welcome. You're welcome. So let's go back to the beginning, as I always do. When did you get into reading? Were you a reader as a kid? What kind of stuff were you into back then?
Well, I would have read a lot as a child. I was really into Animals of Farthingwood. I really loved that whole series. There's quite a few books in that series, and Colin Dan wrote lots of books actually about animals. So I was very into that. What else did I read? Oh, Enid Blyton.
Right. Famous Five and all that.
Yes, and The Secret Seven and all the boarding school books that she wrote. But I also really liked the magic tree stories that she had, the faraway tree, where children would travel. It was like portal fantasy. They would travel to different lands, and then sometimes there'd be monsters, sometimes there would be nice people, and I loved all those stories as well. Roald Dahl,
of course.
Yep. And just anything really. I loved going to the library. I loved finding a new book and just opening and just seeing what story unfolded. So probably by the time I was 7 or 8, I was writing my own stories.
Wow, okay.
Which mostly were fan fiction of the Animals of Farthingwood. I was obsessed with animals at that age. So yeah, and it just went from there, really.
So when did you start thinking about it more seriously and thinking that, I actually want to write a novel of my own rather than just fan fiction and short stories and things?
When I was 19, 20, I wrote a novel.
Right.
Was a middle grade novel, and I've lost it, which is really annoying. I can't find it. It could possibly be on some old computers. I need to check. But I really enjoyed writing it. It was sort of about fairies and giant lizards who were at war with each other. So lots of fun. Not overly serious fantasy. And I wrote that. And I gave it to some family and friends to read, and some of them quite liked it. But I didn't really seriously try to get that published. I don't really know why. I don't know. I was off traveling and at uni, and it sort of seemed getting published was something that wouldn't happen for me. So I was quite happy that I'd written the story and that people that I'd given to had liked it, and then I didn't think about it too much more. And then at that stage, I went off traveling, got a full-time job, got married, had kids. And writing in those years tended to be short stories as and when I found a bit of time, and just as a hobby, a light hobby, because I didn't have a huge amount of time. And then it was when I turned 30, it was my 30th birthday party.
Right.
One of the people who had read my story, which I'd written when I was 19, 20, it's my husband's uncle. He just came up to me and goes, well, where's the next story? And I was like, I don't have time to write, and too busy, kids, and had all my excuses lined up. And he just was, well, that's terrible excuse, Shauna. Your first book was really good. If you really enjoy something and you're good at it, you really need to try and find time to do it. So that sort of annoyed me because he had tapped into something that had been annoying me for a while, and that I had wanted to find more time to write. And it's something I'd always enjoyed doing, but I was very busy. But the next evening, I was speaking to my husband, and he said, well, look, why don't we do every other night is our night for the bedtime routine?
Right.
And so every other night you will have an hour to write, and just that's your hour of writing time, and it'll be 3 times a week. And it's not very much time, but it's something. And if you schedule that in, you know, you're not missing anything. You know, why not do that? So I thought, right, okay, I'll give that a go and just see if anything comes out, and if I'm, I suppose, not too tired at that time of night to do anything.
Right.
But it sort of seemed to work out. Because I was hyper focused on this hour that I had, I was very productive. And it did sort of take off from there, and that I like didn't miss my writing hours. I sort of came quite rigid about making sure I had that hour. And yeah, so then that's when I started writing properly, I would say.
And is it this book that's the one that you started writing when you were doing it more seriously, your first book?
No, there's another book.
Okay.
Another book that was written. It's sort of similar. It's similar themes and some similar characters.
Okay.
But the first book I wrote ended up, well, when I first wrote it, it was 230,000 words.
Wow.
Yes. And then I did a bit of research and realized that that was a crazy word count. And so edited the story down to 180,000 words. And then I thought, well, you know, I'll maybe try to send this off and see how that goes. So it got rejected. And I did get some feedback, and the story was in 2 timelines. And the feedback I got was that the timeline that was set in ancient Ireland was the really good one, and the one that was set in the future was a bit boring.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. Well, not quite, maybe not as harsh as that, but that was the general gist. You know, the stuff in the future was kind of, people have read that before. The stuff in Ireland felt interesting and new, and because I know that part of history very well, people actually, you know, felt like they were enjoying the historical aspects of that story. So I set that book aside and took in all that feedback and thought, right, I'll focus on the story, and I'll just keep it in the one timeline, which is in Ireland, in the 10th century, and we'll just see what happens when I keep the book a bit simpler. You know, not having so many characters and different timelines and having to weave everything together.
So one of the questions we had sent in was, how long did you spend doing research, given as you said, you know, this area, you know, it's where you live and that sort of stuff anyway, but did you have to do a lot of research to get the mythology right? Even though you're writing historical fantasy, you're making stuff up and you're adding your own stuff on. Did you want to get some of the structure right of the historical events to kind of weave your story through them?
Well, it is a part of history I would have known about a lot anyway. I would read historical nonfiction books anyway. And Irish history pre the Norman invasion, I find especially interesting. So it was an area of a time period I knew a lot about. Right. But still, then when you go to write a book about it, you have to research it more, because you know, everything has to be, well, no, everything doesn't have to be perfect, because it is historical fantasy. You can change things. Yeah. But you need to be aware of what you have changed, if that makes sense. Yeah, yeah. You can't just sort of wade in and with a sledgehammer and but not know what you're changing. So yes, I did a lot of research to make sure it was historically as accurate as I could make it, because I also have the magical people in the story who of course didn't exist or didn't have those magical powers. So that's an extra element that I've weaved into the story that isn't historically accurate. Okay.
So one of the questions we also had was, you know, what are your thoughts on rewriting parts of history to make it more accessible to modern readers? I understand there are some things, having written a historical book myself, historical fantasy, that some things I've changed because the more barriers you put in place, the more difficult it can be for a reader to access that world if they're unfamiliar with it. So I've had to peel back some things on purpose, knowingly, like you said, I'm not doing it with a sledgehammer. But I want the word fantasy really big somewhere on the cover, so people don't go, well, that didn't happen, that didn't happen. Like, I know I've changed things, but did you feel okay with changing some things because you've researched it yourself?
Oh, well, In terms of the history, it is very accurate. It didn't change a huge amount.
Yeah.
I've squeezed the timeline together a little bit so there wasn't such big time gaps. And I've changed a few names because several characters had the same name. There was lots of Olafs at that time. So I didn't want everyone, it's confusing enough when you have all these Irish names without having people called the same name. So I did change a few things, but obviously, like, some of my characters that have magical powers are historical characters. So they were alive, they're recorded, they existed, but I have given them magical powers. That is a fantastical part of the story. So I don't know. I mean, I did in my author's note at the back make a point of saying this is historical fantasy. Do not use this to revise for a history exam. It's fun. It's meant to be a reimagining of how Ireland, or how people in Ireland lost their magical powers. Because if you go back into the older mythologies, the Tuatha Dé Danann and the Fomorians were real mythological tribes. And some of them had children or grandchildren who are renowned famous warriors in other parts of Irish mythology. So I was sort of explaining or trying to say, well, there could have been more people that had these magical powers that we don't know about. And I've kind of reimagined a period of history where some of the characters had magical powers. So I don't know. I feel like it's fine to tell stories and to use your imagination and to not worry too much. I would sort of dread doing a book like Hilary Mantel, like Wolf Hall, where that period of history is known to the nth degree. And she is a historical fiction work she's doing. So that must be very hard because you want to use your imagination, you're putting in how you think people are feeling, but there's documents that possibly conflict at times. So that is very difficult. People who write historical fiction in periods of history that are very well documented is no easy task. I was lucky in that period of Irish history isn't very well documented.
Right.
So I have a bit more leeway in that respect. Like we know the dates, we know who was at the battles, but we don't know a lot about the individuals.
Yeah.
So I've had a lot of artistic license to fill that all in, and I don't feel bad about doing that.
No, well, this is it. It's what could have happened, and as you said, it's fiction, it's fantasy. It's not supposed to be a retelling to the best of the documents that are there.
Yeah.
So when you started writing this new novel, how long did it take you to do like that first draft?
So this novel, I had it written and edited. It took a year.
Okay.
So, but the book before that, I think I was learning to write a lot, learning to edit. So that first book, which was the 230,000 words, that took about 5-6 years to get that finished and edited. But there was a lot of learning in that time period.
Right. Yeah.
I could have written 400,000 words because so much of it at the start was just rubbish and got deleted and try again. But that was a lot of fun. And whenever my husband's uncle said about, you should be writing, you really enjoy it, that was the point. At the start, it wasn't about being published. It wasn't really even about writing a novel. It was just about trying to make time for myself to do something that I loved and had been missing. Yeah.
You got a busy life, you got a family, so try and find time for something that you want to do for yourself is always going to be a challenge.
It is. And I find that just that 1 hour, that small amount of time was really helpful, because before that I had sort of ideas in my head, oh no, I need like 3 or 4 hours together to get into something, and that ship had sailed. I don't have 3 or 4 hours together to do anything.
No, I always say that I don't think that's actually a good idea, because it takes time to be able to build up to write for that long anyway.
Yeah.
It's writing like anything else, just takes time. So if you can write for half an hour, without any breaks or distractions or kids or the phone ringing or social media or whatever it is. You can just write for 30 minutes, great. And then if you can stretch it to an hour, great. And just keep doing that regularly. I think that's enough, rather than say, right, I've got 4 hours going to write for a solid block of 4 hours, because you won't. I won't do that even now. I can't just sit and write for solid 4 hours. It doesn't happen.
Yeah, no, I know. So I think I had unrealistic thoughts. Maybe when I was 19, I think I was really focused and I did sit down and I could write for 3 to 4 hours. But I don't know, maybe that's just being 19 and being really into something and you have all the time in the world.
No responsibilities, no worries, no concerns, nothing to distract you. No exactly. Social media when we were 19.
No, there wasn't. I think, like it maybe just about had a phone, like a mobile phone, but it wouldn't have been a smartphone at that stage.
Yeah.
So 0 distractions.
People watching this now won't realize that we're slightly older, that the internet wasn't what it is now. So the fact that you're watching us talking on the internet is kind of a miracle. We've lived pre-internet. We know what it's like.
Yeah, well, it took like a whole minute just for the screen to load.
Dial-up. Oh, I remember those days. Not fondly, but I remember the days of dial-up.
Yeah. So no, there was no distractions when I was 19, but obviously skip forward 11 years, loads of distractions. So just making that decision to have that 1 hour every other night was the key for me.
And you stuck to that until you finished that first draft of what turned out to be The Children of Gods and Fighting Men.
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah. By the time I got to The Children of Gods and Fighting Men, I know at the end, I maybe would have worked a little bit the weekend just to get the editing finished.
Yeah.
Because also the final edits for that book happened when lockdown was on.
Right.
So we had the kids at home, we were homeschooling, and I was working. So all that evening time disappeared because I was working in the evenings then because I'd been homeschooling in the mornings. So because I was so close to getting it finished at the weekends, then I just spent some weekends trying to get it done so I could start submitting. So
how was it when you sent it out on submission? How many agents did you send it to? Do you do it in batches? Because people always want to know this kind of thing.
Yes, so I did batches of about 8. So the first time I sent it out, I had 1 full manuscript request.
Okay.
And 1 small press was interested, but they wanted me to not have it set in Ireland. They wanted to market it as epic fantasy.
Right.
So they just wanted me to like lift all the characters out, rename them, and set them into like Westeros.
Right. Yeah.
Which I didn't want to do. So that was fine. That was no bother. But everyone else was fairly quiet. Like I didn't get a lot of replies from the other people. Maybe lockdown was badly affecting everybody. So I kind of let that run for a while and started writing my next book. I definitely think you should do that when you're submitting, so you're not thinking about it too much. So I think we got to December then. So 3 months later, I thought, right, we'll send off to a new batch. So again, I sent off to about 8 agents / a couple of small presses. And both the small presses came back with offers. And I had another full manuscript request. And actually, I nearly signed with one of the small presses. But they ended up having issues of their own, just completely separate to my book, which was causing delays. And then I just thought, you know what, I'll maybe pass if they're having issues. It's kind of seemed to be taking a long time. And so I thought, no, that's maybe just not quite right. So then I thought, right, do you know what? I will send off to 1 more batch. And if that doesn't work out, I will self-publish, was sort of my thoughts. So I had booked in a really good copy editor. He had a 3 or 4 month waiting list to get in with them. So I thought, well, that's perfect because I'll book them and then I'll have this one last go at submitting to agents and publishers. And then if nothing happens, then he's ready to do the copy edits and I can have a think about self-publishing.
Right.
because there's a lot involved in that. It's not just getting the copy edits done. I'd have to then think about book covers and how to market my book, and I hadn't even thought about that. I just thought if at least the book was copy edited, I would be ready. Anyway, so then I sent off to the agents, and Head of Zeus also had an open submission window, which I know like Angry Robot does sometimes.
Yep.
And you know, they had one recently. So Head of Zeus had an open window, and also a couple of my favorite agents had opened for submissions because they had been closed during lockdown. So brilliant. I thought, right, let's just send off to everybody. And then that's when people suddenly seemed to be interested, which was weird.
So who did you hear from first?
I heard from an agent first. One of the agents asked for a fill. So this all happened quite quickly. And then a couple of days later, Head of Zeus asked for the fill.
Okay.
And then a couple of days later, another agent asked for a fill, and then another agent asked for a fill. Yeah, it all sort of seemed to kind of kick off at the same time. So I was getting all these within a week.
Wow.
Which again was weird because my previous book had just been standard rejections.
So did you get more than one offer from agents or representation?
Yes, I had 3 offers from agents in the end. Yeah, and then Head of Zeus offered as well without an agent.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, but then I wanted an agent because I just felt because I don't know, well, at that stage I didn't know any other writers. I'm from a small town in Ireland, so I just felt I don't know anything about the industry, and I really felt I needed an agent to represent me, and not just for this series, but for future books, hopefully. So yeah, so I said to Head of Zeus, thanks for the offer, brilliant, but I would like to get an agent on board. And I had that stage, I had offers, so I'm going to pick one of the people who have made the offer to represent me.
So you should say your agent is Ed Wilson.
Yes.
And how has it been working with him then? What were his, because that's the interesting thing. My first conversation I had with my agent, Juliet, about the book, she had her own thoughts and feelings and we talked it through. What was that first conversation like with Ed? Do you talk on the phone or Zoom or Skype or something?
Yeah, Zoom. So yeah, no, so it was all 3 agents that made the fill offers were all lovely. And so it was, I had meetings with all of them and sort of suppose had to pick, and which was also really difficult. But Ed just really, he's so enthusiastic, he's so lovely. And he was talking about parts of my book that no one else had spoken about.
Really?
Which were quite important to me. But no one else had quite picked up on that. So it just felt to me, he is someone who has read my book and he has got some of the hidden things.
Okay.
But the important hidden things, he has found them. And so for me, then that was quite important, because then I felt he understood what I was doing and kind of knew where I wanted to go with the series. And so then when I was speaking to Head of Zeus, because they initially had made the offer, all they wanted me to do was to add 2 chapters at the end of the story, because they thought it had finished too quickly.
Right.
The ending wasn't, it wasn't strong enough. It kind of was a bit too abrupt. So when I spoke to the other agents about what I wanted to change, 2 of them were in agreement with Head of Zeus that this was a good idea. And then one of the other agents wanted me to change something else that I didn't agree with.
Okay.
So anyway, so for me then, like Ed kind of was the one that had got all these extra things and had also spoke to me about a career in writing, not just how to sell this book, which
interesting
was important to me. So, and then Ed's just lovely. And all the agents were lovely. So, I could have very happily signed with any of them, really. But Ed just kind of won me over.
So he spoke about, you'd planned this as a trilogy.
Yes.
Before, right. So did he kind of say, right, well, what do you want to do after this? Where do you want to go? What other kind of stories do you want to write? Do you want to stay within historical fantasy? Did you have these conversations with him quite early?
Yes, very early. So in that first conversation,
Okay.
it was, what else do you do? What do you want to do? Where do you see this series going? What about future novels? And so I find all that really helpful. And that you have, as you say, you want someone on your side that's always gonna promote your work and help you. And I just felt that he already was, I suppose, being helpful and kind of thinking of the future, which I hadn't maybe thought about as much, but I felt, right, yes, you are someone, you know what you're doing and you know the right questions to ask me.
Yeah, that's good. That's really good when you feel like you've got a good fit for not just the current book, but what you're going to do next and what you'd like to do. That's really good. So how did you find the editing process then? Once, because you'd spent time editing itself and you said you're potentially going to go and work with a copy editor, but now you sign the contract with Head of Zeus and then you've got to work with an editor there. How was that editing process?
Well, I really enjoyed it. I like editing. It's something I enjoy. I like making a book better and kind of polishing it. So the first thing I had to do was write those 2 extra chapters. So I did that first and then sent it in for the structural edits.
Right.
So that they were doing that already with the 2 chapters that they had asked for. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. There wasn't too much that had to be changed. It was just about maybe making some scenes more emotional or kind of pulling out a bit of tension. So all things that I felt were very doable. There wasn't any major motivational changes or character changes or cutting of anything. It was more adding.
Right.
When I submitted the book, it was 114,000 words. So the final copy is about 125,000 words.
Okay.
So I added. So I know it's like normally the other way, you're cutting, but maybe I think with my first book, because it was so long, I had been very mindful of trying to make this book tighter and not having all that waffle. So I maybe overdone it.
In edits, I've been told, like, take out 20k on one book, and then during the editing process, I think I added in 16. So the overall number only went down by 4k, but that was just part of the edits. So yeah. Okay. So 100 plus. It's still a relatively lean book for fantasy, when some fantasy books are 200, 300, 4,000, 100,000 words.
Well, I think because I'm that crossover genre, which is historical fantasy. So I think historical fiction books are maybe 150k. It is a longer genre anyway. You have books like Pillars of the Earth and Wolf Hall, and you can get some very like thick books in historical fiction too. But I think generally people prefer it to be a bit shorter. So I think the word count I had actually ended up being good for both genres.
Yeah. So that's how it's going to be marketed, I guess, as to appeal to both.
Yes.
Both markets.
Well, hopefully, and hopefully people will like it. I suppose I'm always mindful that people who are historical fiction fans will not like the fantasy elements being in it. But I think because it's Irish, I might get away with it, because in Irish history, if you go back to the older histories, there is magic in it. So it's not a complete departure from what is known about Irish history.
Yeah. As you said, it's so interwoven with mythology, and a lot of mythology contains myths that have magic in them, and other races that are common to to England, Ireland, Scotland, and Wales. So there's always stories like St. George and the dragon and stuff, and it's like, well, what was the dragon? And it's fantastical, and it's on the flag in Wales and everything else. It's like, come on, it's not as if we don't have fantastic symbols and creatures and things all over sports teams and everywhere else, that they're there all the time.
Exactly. So. Yeah. So I've tapped into that. So hopefully people will buy into that and read my story.
Excellent. So now that you've been through the process of having a book traditionally published, what are some of the things that you know now that you didn't know then? Because people always want to find a glimpse behind the curtain and see what's going on. What other stuff have you learned about it?
Gosh, no. um, I really don't know. I kind of went into publishing knowing very little.
Okay.
So and then was actually very thankful that they did so much for me and I didn't have to learn anything, I suppose. Because whenever we were talking earlier about potentially going down the self-published route, that frightened me because it seemed I had to learn an awful lot to do that well. I would have needed to get cover designers. I would have needed to learn how to market and, you know, how do you do that and how much do you pay for these things? Whereas I felt whenever Head of Zeus took on the book, you know, aside from the editing, which, you know, you have the structural edits, the copy edits, and then the final proofreads. Apart from that, they've done everything. And that's been good because I feel that they're the experts and they know what they're doing. And, you know, they are helping me as opposed to me having to discover myself. And I know I would have struggled with that. Some people are very good with technology and social media, and I'm not. I find it quite not difficult. Like I'm fine kind of talking about my book, but I just things like TikTok and
Yes,
they just frighten me. I don't know what I would be doing. So yes, I'm very grateful with traditional publishing that you get a lot of help and support, and Head of Zeus have been brilliant. You know, they're always emailing and talking to me about ideas and do I want to do this and do I not, and it's been really good, I suppose, collaboration that way.
Yeah.
But they have taken the lead, which I've enjoyed.
Yeah, I feel the same. I think it would be a lot more time to self-publish, to learn the skills, and then to kind of keep doing things to keep the book moving, to keep it aware, to keep doing marketing. I don't have the time to commit to that either, so I'm happy to have my publisher do that, some of that stuff for me, and take the shoulder the responsibility for that. So you know, yeah, I prefer it that way just because of my lifestyle, I guess.
Yeah, no, yeah, yes, there's definitely that. You know, it's a lot easier, but for me it's the ability to learn that sort of stuff. It's just it is. I think I was talking to someone about marketing before and they started talking about how you would get around Amazon algorithms, and at that stage you're going into like hard science, and it's just too difficult. It's over my head and I can't learn it. I think you may as well start speaking to me in French at that point because I cannot follow this conversation anymore. And that was my worry, is that it's just it's going to be too difficult for me to do these things that people are telling me I need to do. So yeah, I'm very glad Head of Zeus have a team that do that stuff.
Me too. Yeah, me too, Angry Robot. Very pleased. So Children of God and Fighting Men comes out start of September. Where are you in the process on working on book 2 and 3 of the trilogy?
So book 2 has been handed in, but I haven't done my edit phase. So I think they're leaving it until book 1 is released before they start coming back to me with the edits, which is good. Because as well as kind of doing some promotional work at the minute, it's also the summer holidays, so I wouldn't have time to do the edits at the minute anyway. So I'm glad that will be kind of September, October time. So that's kind of on the horizon, and then I have started writing book 3.
Do you have
early stages of book 3 at the minute?
Okay. Do you have more of a fixed writing schedule now than when you did before, when you were just doing it in the evenings?
Well, yes. So actually this week is sort of my last week in my job. I'm pulling back, and I'm kind of, for a few months I'll be going in to review a few things, but essentially I'm not working anymore. Just a few days here and there. So once the kids go back to school, I will be writing full time and seeing how that goes for a while. which is really exciting. It's lovely. I don't know how that's going to go. Hopefully I'm going to really enjoy it. But I did get a small advance for my book, which I saved.
Mm-hmm.
And that was my thought process, was that I kind of wanted time to be able to write and to get the books finished to a standard that I felt was good enough.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just felt I needed more time, because when it took me over a year to write book 2, and it was only that I had already written about 60,000 words whenever I signed my contracts, that I really was able to get book 2 finished in time. So I just felt like book 3 is going to be a bit more difficult, because you're tying up everything, and I need more time. I need more time to be able to do that. And for me, using that advance to give me a bit of space was perfect. And I have been working for, I don't know, 15, 16 years at this point. And I just thought, if this doesn't work out, which it might not, I can always get another job, and I sort of thought I'll take a 2-year break and just see if this goes anywhere.
Yeah, why, if you can, as you said, why not have a go now, try it, see what happens.
Yes, exactly. And then all my kids are now in school, so I have I suppose when they're at school I can write. And yeah, so it sort of just worked out perfectly. And I thought, sometimes you have to take a gamble on yourself, and which, and as I said, if it doesn't work out, which it might not, there are jobs always there.
I'm sure it'll work out. I've read the book, I've given the cover quote, so I think it will work out just fine. And so you've got the launch in Waterstones in Belfast coming up at the start of September. And then in towards the middle end of September, you're at FantasyCon as well over here in London for that, and I'll see you there for that.
Yes, I'm very much looking forward to meeting other authors and talking about books for a weekend. I can't wait, because I was saying to you before we started recording, most of the time when I was writing my books, I wasn't on social media. So it was very insular and not isolated, because it was my hobby and I was enjoying it. But suddenly now I have discovered social media. It's like, wow, there's all these people that are doing the same thing as me. And it's been wonderful connecting with other authors and writers and fans of fantasy and historical fiction. So I'm very much looking forward to having a whole weekend of talking about books.
Yes, being part of surrounded by your community, just the same kind of people who get all the struggles we were saying before, all the issues and all the things that you struggle with and I struggle with as a writer. They get it. They've all been through it.
Yes.
Yeah, the same breed of people.
Exactly. Yes. So really, I can't wait.
Brilliant. Okay. Well, thank you for coming on, and thank you for telling me and everybody about your journey. And Children of Gods and Fighting Men is out pretty much as soon as this video is out. So go and check it out from Head of Zeus. And you'll see Shauna perhaps at future events and signings, and watch out for the rest of the trilogy in the future.
Stephen.
All right. Goodbye, everyone. Good night.